Morning. Welcome to Mercer Island. Thank you all for coming to the inaugural event of the Automated, Connected, and Electric and Shared Northwest Network. This is our very first seminar in our seminar series, so you are making history by being here today. My name is Scott Kuznicki. I'm the Director of Safety and Mobility Technology Solutions for the Transpo Group, and I'd like to warmly welcome you to Mercer Island and warmly welcome you to our event today. And also, I'd like to say, this presentation has decided that it's the wrong one. And this is what happens when you depend on automation. I was going to mention Easy Mile anyway, since they're presenting today. So we'd like to thank you for being here at our event. The event is being hosted by the ACES Northwest Network this morning. And from the ACES Northwest Network, it will be my pleasure later on to introduce to you Mr. Bruce Agnew, who's the director of the Cascadia Center. And as I mentioned, I'm Scott Kuznicki with the Transpo Group. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce City Council Member Wendy Weicker. Please join me in welcoming Wendy.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Mercer Island. We're right here at Ground Zero with the regional traffic and transportation and Sound Transit trains coming. And our city's been looking at this for decades. We have a lot of technical residents who are using technology. They're using Uber, they're using Lyft. They're figuring out how to carpool and share transportation. And it's really important as we have this growing region, with more people coming here and more businesses developing here, that we work together to figure out how to make this transportation system work for all of us. I'm really excited to represent the city and our work to find last mile solutions, as we like to call them. Encourage our residents to bike, to walk, to use alternative modes of transportation. Whatever we can do to keep as many cars off the road as possible, because those roads are just getting more and more congested, right? So thank you for coming here today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of the solution. We're excited to be a part of figuring out how to work together to make this region mobile. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy. And it's great to have regional partnerships, and that's something that ACES Northwest Network is building. And we're very proud to say that we have friends in the legislature and friends on the city councils throughout the region. And those are the people that we look to help us collaborate. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Bruce Agnew, who's the director of the Cascadia Center, and also the director of the ACES Northwest Network.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Transpo. I guess it's a tradition here in Mercer Island to say I'm a Mercer Island resident. I've been since 1999 with my family. The Cascadia Center is very proud to be the staff to the ACES Northwest Network, and we're going to hear more about that from Scott, Steve, and others. We have been around actually since 1993. For 10 years, our work was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which allowed us to get involved in electrification of transportation dating back to about 2005. We partnered with Microsoft and we held Beyond Oil conferences at the Microsoft campus to explore this exciting new world of electrification. And of course, fast forward now, 2017, and you see where Dow Constantine and the King County Council Metro is moving to all electric buses in Bellevue. So it's clearly a technology that's a very integral part of our ACES agenda, where we've seen some substantial progress. My colleague, Steve Marshall, you're going to hear from later, I've enjoyed working with on a common cause on electrification, now ACES. And in many ways, the work that we're going to, the initiative we're talking about today is an extension of that. Our co-chairs, the people who came to Cascadia in the spring of this year to enlist us to work with the community and help navigate this strange, brave new world of technology and transportation. Our two gentlemen, Tom Alberg from Madrona Venture Group, 22-year member of the board of directors of Amazon, is one of our co-chairs, and Brian Misteli from INREX, which is a worldwide traffic data management companies, which and they work a lot with governments on analyzing traffic to help solve congestion issues. These two gentlemen are also experienced skippers, one sail and one power, and as I indicated, they will help us navigate these waters of the ACES world. And what's exciting about this is, because I've worked a lot with governments over the years, I was elected a county official up in Snohomish County, and this effort is led by technology companies and employers working with governments at all levels, at the congressional level, at the state level. Later today at IREX, we're going to have our first ACES legislative caucus to meet with legislators to talk about regulations and issues and incentives for electrification, connections with transit. And we're going to be working at, and have been working at the Puget Sound Regional Council level and here at the local level. As you hear from Steve and others, we've been working primarily in Bellevue and the east side in Seattle. We also have, and you may have caught some press coverage, Madrona Venture Group, which is Tom Alberg's group, has proposed phasing in autonomous vehicles on the I-5 corridor. Exciting proposal. We're not going to talk a lot about that today, but it's an issue in the future in terms of blending, connecting automated vehicles, not only on the interstates, but also in our local streets and community arterials. So you're going to hear a lot about that today, and I'm excited about this venture, and I hope you as citizens will help us move the ball forward.
Thank you, Bruce. And we mentioned the extensive roster of technology companies that are involved in the ACES Northwest Network, and I'd like to point out that these are just some of the people who have stepped forward to support this initiative. And as Bruce mentioned, the purpose of our network is to make this region here in the Pacific Northwest the place to develop and deploy and use autonomous, connected, and electric carriage vehicles. We have the infrastructure in place to do that. And we have a whole host of technology companies, some of them right here in this region, that can help us carry that ball forward. So we're really excited to be promoting this, and we're really excited to be a part of this new economy that's rapidly developing. How many people were at the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce dinner last week? So you heard Professor Tony Siva speaking. He said that the mix of sharing electric and driverless cars can disrupt everything from parking to insurance, oil demand, and retail. And I think he's right. This is going to change how we get around, and hopefully change it for the better. One of the things that Professor Siva talked about was the internal combustion engine and how inefficient it is. And one of the fascinating things that I don't think a lot of people know is that electric motors last a lot longer than internal combustion engines. And you'll think about that next time you walk into the bathroom, you flip the switch and the bath fan turns on and then it starts on fire. But what I'm saying is true. They do last a lot longer, and the maintenance costs are a lot lower, and there's a lot of fluids that don't need to be added to this vehicle and later on recycled or disposed of somehow. So we're seeing an environmental benefit from these things, and I think that that's a very important aspect of the ACES technology. So let's think about some disruptive things. Just shout out, what do you think is happening today that's extremely disruptive of technology, perhaps? Just shout it out. Don't be shy. Pardon me? iPhone, okay. Internet retail. Anything else?
Solar energy.
Solar energy, great. I mean, these are technologies that we're all aware of, right? The iPhone is actually interacting with retail. It's providing essentially a mobile lifestyle to anyone that wants it, that can afford a $1,000 iPhone. But it's fascinating to think about how these technologies started out, and only a few people could predict what was going to happen, and what's ultimately happened has been largely driven by the amazing ingenuity of people at these companies around the world. And I'm going to point out something that's highly disruptive that probably will make a lot of people say, why? Why are these things flying around? I hate these things. How many people like drones? Okay. As long as it's not peering into your backyard, right? This is a highly disruptive technology. This promises to drastically reduce the cost of doing a lot of things, particularly with inspecting our infrastructure, which we know is deteriorating around the United States. And these technologies are enabled by three things, I think, and I'll talk about what those three things are. But this drone right here can be programmed to be completely autonomous and accomplish tasks without operator intervention. And That is stunning. This is military-grade technology from 10 years ago that a consumer can buy for about $1,000. Stunning to think about that. So what's enabling all this technology? What's enabling these autonomous cars, these electric cars, the iPhone, all these things that we're beginning to take for granted in our society? Well, number one, it's the intense miniaturization of sensor technology. You think about what's packed inside your iPhone. I don't know if it could fly to space level or not, but I'm pretty sure that it could. There's a lot of power in your pocket. And anyone that bought a Samsung Galaxy Note 8 knows how dangerous that power can be. So that these things are getting smaller and smaller, and they're getting much more powerful. And that trend is continuing. We also have something else happening, which is the very low-cost mass production of all this technology. The more we produce, the lower the cost of producing it becomes. And that is enabling us to lower the cost of goods, lower the cost of services. Now, something else that's even more scarier. Now, did I say more scarier? My mother's an English teacher, and she would not be proud of it. Something else that's much scarier, something else that I want you to think about. Maybe you're scared of it. And it is the cloud. Do you know why autonomous vehicle developers and manufacturers want to be here in Washington State? It is because we have two of the world's foremost cloud computing technology companies here, Microsoft and Amazon. That is why they want to be here. And we should be very proud that we've had the foresight as a collective community to develop and embrace, particularly Microsoft and the amazing work that they've done. Cloud computing was the third driver of all of this. And so the questions you might ask is, well, how is this going to change things? Is this going to make everything better? Are there unanticipated consequences? This is a photograph of the I-405 corridor. It looks pretty empty. It's not Photoshop, I can tell you that. But right now, the people that drive on this corridor are limited by something that hasn't changed in 100 years, maybe 1,000 years, and that's the human brain, human factors. We can only follow other vehicles so closely. We can only drive at a certain speed in the brain during inclement weather because there are limitations to how we can behave as human beings. And as a traffic engineer, I can tell you that the study of that science is amazing. And I can also tell you that you're absolutely right. Everyone else is a terrible driver. So this promises to change something about that corridor, but it promises to change a lot of other things too. And we're very, very hopeful at the ACE Northwest Network that we're going to see efficiency gains by reducing our fuel consumption, lowering the maintenance costs of owning and operating a vehicle. And we really want to see more effective utilization of human talent and ability. We think about autonomous trucks driving in and out of the Port of Seattle, freeing up those people to do something else in the field of technology that's a transferable skill. We're really excited about that. We certainly want to see fewer crashes. I know everybody's concerned about traffic safety, and I am as a traffic engineer. We want to reduce our environmental impact. We want more options. We want transportation choices for people. We want them to be able to catch a shuttle that's electric to a park and ride, for example. And we want some of these things to be able to operate continuously without the huge cost of labor. This is our Governor Jay Inslee at an event at Echodyne. That is evidence of sensor miniaturization right there. That thing on the roof of this car, which is a very special kind of radar unit, used to be about 4 times that size. And probably close, I'd say about 10 times more expensive, Bruce. Yeah. Yes, and Echodyne is a member of ACES. Governor Inslee had the foresight to do something very exciting this year. He issued an executive order because he saw this. 94% of the 30,000 deaths that occur on our nation's highways every year can be tied to human choice. So he issued an executive order. Executive orders are really popular these days. And he figured I better get on the bandwagon. I need to issue one myself. It's called Autonomous Vehicle Testing and Technology in Washington State and Autonomous Vehicle Work Group. I'm very glad he had a government-y sounding title. Unfortunately, it's not an acronym. But it's great. This is amazing, the foresight that he's shown. What is Governor Inslee doing? He's asking all of his state agencies to work together to remove barriers to testing autonomous vehicles in Washington State, while at the same time ensuring that they are held accountable for their safety performance. This is a stunning executive order, and it's very exciting, and it's happening right here in Washington State. And I've mentioned the word autonomous a couple of times, and raise your hand if you think that autonomous vehicles are a little bit scary and you might not want to get in one. Don't be shy, you're going to be alone. Right. You know, how many times has your computer just shut down without even telling you? I will point out that autonomous vehicles have a lot more fail-safes than the average computer, but perhaps you don't realize that you're already driving a vehicle that has a lot of automation. Analog brakes, they've been around for 25 years. Your car, I guarantee you your car has analog brakes. Stability control, that thing that keeps you from swerving off the roadway when you hit a patch of ice. Cruise control that is adaptive and follows the car in front of you. Lane departure warning, sometimes that actually moves the steering wheel to keep you from drifting. And technology that senses pedestrians and other hazards and brakes the car in an emergency. Those systems are all out there today. They're all automated. And they step in where perhaps you're unable to step in or where your attention has been drawn by something else. And the point here is that all this automation is leading to autonomy. So don't think that this is all untested or that it doesn't exist. It's already being done today. And we're really excited about it because we have a lot of proven concepts all over the globe that we can talk about. And then why is this important? Well, we're going to talk about automated and autonomous vehicles today, connected vehicles. Certainly the electric vehicles, those are very common. And finally, this shared mobility concept. So, but let's reorder these and talk about electric, shared, connected, and autonomous, because that's kind of the order that they've appeared here in our world. If we're talking about electric cars, we can point to an example that's sold right here at Bellevue Square, the Tesla. How many people have seen a Tesla before? I'm amazed at how quick they are. I have a 14-year-old car that gets 27 miles per gallon. I probably won't be buying a Tesla, but I think they're amazing technology. How about the shared? Think in your mind, what's an example of shared mobility? And you'll be right, because you're thinking of transit, which is probably one of the very first shared mobility concepts. A whole bunch of people get together and they ride a bus somewhere. Hopefully they all get along and they're friendly. But this is what we do in our region. We operate an extensive network of buses. And so in order to use shared mobility, you agree to the schedule, you agree to wait, you agree to service disruptions, you agree to subsidize price that significantly reduces your cost of using that shared mobility. So there's good and bad in all of this. But what about new shared mobility, which many of you have probably experienced when you picked up your disruptor, your iPhone, and you called one of these services? How many people have used one of these services before? It's amazing. I can see exactly how far away that vehicle is, and it's going to get there in 2 minutes, and it's going to take me directly where I need to go, but at a significant cost. So this is what we're talking about in the new world of shared mobility. Now, does that mean that we're getting rid of transit? I don't think it means that at all. In fact, I think it means that we're going to increase transit ridership significantly if we can figure out a way to make these technologies work with transit. And those barriers are not technological. Those barriers are all about figuring out ways to encourage the private sector and the public sector to work together to deliver something like this. And what is that problem going to solve? Well, it's connected and shared now. It's no longer shared, it's connected. I think it's going to solve the problem of what we call the last mile. You know that this region is largely sparsely developed compared to European cities, for example. So here's a sample transit network. It doesn't look like Mercer Island. It's not. There's a couple of stops on this transit network, and functionally you can only get to that much from a stop. If you notice the one in the lower right-hand corner is an ellipse, and maybe that signifies that it's almost impossible to get to the areas near there because it's a long walk, maybe there's a hill or some type of a barrier to walking. This is what transit can serve. It can serve these areas effectively without the use of a car. But what happens if we add this into the mix? And then we say, well, now we have shared mobility services that are going to give 1, 2, 3, 4 people a ride to exactly where they need to go and connect them to transit so that they don't need to own their own car. They don't need to store their car at the parking lot. This is the revolution that's occurring, frankly, all over the world. And it's a revolution that's driven by ACE's technology. So what are we doing? Well, we're taking the bus transfers and saying maybe those don't need to happen anymore because we can move people directly from their home to the transit center. We're taking away perhaps waiting for the bus, because buses can use this connected technology to be much more reliable and operate their routes much more flexibly. And I think we need to point out that Metro Transit has certainly been a leader in the area of this connected and sharing. They're doing a lot of really neat things there, and I'm very glad to see that they're doing that. We're taking that away and we're replacing it with something much more valuable, which is this. It's more time with your family because your commutes are shorter in terms of duration. And it gives you more time to better yourself. Maybe it gives you more time to take classes, to start a business, to do something else. And that's good for economic growth in our region. So we know what ACES means. That's the one thing I hope you'll take away from here today. But what about these autonomous vehicles? What do they look like? This was developed by NVIDIA, one of our ACES partners. It's the Drive PX chip. It's the size of a license plate. And it is capable of operating a completely autonomous vehicle that needs no intervention from a human being. Now, 5 years ago, this would have been the size of 2 or 3 PCs. In 1997, when one of the very first autonomous vehicle tests was done, they had Buick Park Avenues that had 6 computers in the trunk and something like 3 alternators. It was unbelievable that this technology is now almost the size of an iPhone or an Android phone or a Microsoft Windows phone made by Nokia. This autonomous truck is being tested right now in Nevada. It's driving across the Hoover Dam. If it didn't work, I don't think that the Department of Energy would have let them drive it across the Hoover Dam. But Nevada is allowing these tests on their rural interstate highways to test long-range driving that's completely automated. And look, Mom, no hands. It really is happening. This isn't a Photoshop job. This is for real. This is NVIDIA and PACCAR, which is based in Renton, cooperating to deliver this technology. Pacific Northwest companies making it work. If you've taken the bus in Bellevue like I have, you've probably ridden one of the Proterra electric buses. If you think, have you ridden the Proterra electric bus? Steve, you've ridden it. Steve basically was on the very first Proterra electric bus. I've seen the picture. Everyone else might see that picture later. Now, in California, Proterra is delivering an automated electric bus. Stunning technology. So what can we do? What are our government agencies doing? I think WashDOT is stepping up to the plate and they're embracing this and they're saying, you know what, we are committed to statewide mobility. We're going to make sure that we do the best job we can with maintaining our pavement margins and our signing. And they're moving forward with plans to do that so that these vehicles can operate safely. And that means already we have these profile markings. If you drive down the road, you wander out of your lane, you get a nice little noise to remind you to wake up, put down your phone, put your cup of coffee down. And those markings can be read by the technology in many autonomous vehicles today. And pavement markings are key information for visual light and machine vision systems. These pavement markings have been completely refreshed and they look great. And that's the commitment that Washington State DOT is making to this technology. So I want to leave you with one thought, which is what happens to all these jobs that people are currently doing where they're driving a truck, maybe driving an Uber, driving a taxi. We think something very exciting is going to happen. Think about the truck driver who drives through the port of Seattle overnight. They're driving long hours. It's a swing shift. It's difficult work. It takes them away from their family. What happens if they could get on-the-job training that would train them to maintain the systems in an autonomous truck, which is something that we'll need. Those then become transferable skills that they could take with them to any job that requires the knowledge of how these systems work. This is a new economy that's being created right before our eyes, and it's being created right here in the Pacific Northwest. So the ACES Northwest Network is really proud to be here, and we're glad that we're promoting this new economy. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Steve Marshall from the city of Bellevue. Please welcome Steve Marshall.
thank you. I tell people when I started over doing the work in Bellevue that I'm new, but I'm not new. As Bruce mentioned, we've been doing a lot of these conferences, starting with Microsoft over 10 years ago, trying to figure out how do you move from oil to electricity, what are the benefits, how do you get it up and running, how do you accelerate and integrate that technology into what we have, what are some of the advantages, and just trying to figure out how do you get the word out. And I'm here to say some of the events that we put on have formed the platform for some of the great sales. We have the #1 Nissan Leaf dealership in the entire world in Bellevue. It's amazing. They've sold more Nissan Leafs than any other dealership in the world. We have one of the #1 Tesla dealerships in Bellevue Square. When they offered the Tesla Model 3 about this time last year, they had people that were lined up outside, around the corner, down the stairs, out the door of Bellevue Square, around the block. And they sold more vehicles in 2 days in terms of overall sales volume than Macy's sold all year in terms of their overall gross sales. They're going to be starting to deliver these Model 3s. People had to sign up and give a $1,000 deposit to be able to do it. And one of the things they did is they said, people are limited to just 2. You couldn't order more than 2. So more people ordered 2 than they didn't order 2. About 60% of the folks that ordered 2 coming in. So they'll be starting to deliver these things at a rate of about 30, 40 a day when they get up to full production. So part of what we have here is we have some of the best and the most vibrant electric sales, electric charging infrastructure. We've got Proterra electric buses, which kind of based on that technology. So it's starting to roll. It's starting to get much cheaper. So what are we doing with some of this? Well, I thought about talking about traffic, but everybody knows how bad the traffic is. So I'm not going to talk about that. This is what I started doing in May. We wanted to have an intelligent transportation strategy. You probably can't read that, but the goal is to make Bellevue a global leader in every element of ACES, automated, connected, electric, and shared. And to make Bellevue and this whole east side area less congested, safer, cleaner, more attractive to business than ever before. So the future of transportation, and I think Scott did a great job, is vehicles that are going to be autonomous, connected, electric, and shared. This is the transportation device. Your smartphone really is what's making a lot of this stuff happen faster than anybody ever thought just a few years ago. In fact, it was only 10 years ago that the first iPhone was sold. I mean, this is kind of an amazing thing. And it was about 9 years ago that they opened it up to having apps from people other than Apple. And now, of course, it's an indispensable thing that we all have in our pockets, or at least I think just maybe 95%, 99%. So now we're getting into the production phase. So this is a Chrysler Pacifica. It's electric and it's autonomous. It's being tested out in Phoenix. We've got BMW Reach Now is having electric cars are part of car sharing. They're going to become autonomous. And BMW, in fact, has installed Alexa so that you can ask Amazon's Echo to do things. You can say, Alexa, tell me where the grocery store is that's nearest to where I am. Tell me about where the next bus stop is. And we're going to be talking about this later today. Easy Mile and several others, Local Motors, Navia, are making autonomous electric shuttles. This is what it looks like. It's basically a small bus. It goes autonomously, picks up people on a route that can be programmed. It's basically a horizontal elevator. And when people get worried about electric and autonomous and all of that, I point out that, you know, we've had elevators that are basically autonomous electric vehicles for a long time. But when they were first introduced, people would not get on elevators. They would still take the stairs. There were a lot of people that just were afraid of getting on elevators. And then later, when elevators became automated, when they got rid of the operators, there were people who did not want to get on elevators without an operator. Now, if you got on an elevator and there's somebody in it operating, you're wondering, what's wrong with the elevator? But it took a while for people to get accustomed to what this could do, and it has transformed cities. I mean, imagine a city of more than 5 stories without elevators. They didn't exist. So if you look at Paris, the old part of Paris, you look at London, you look at Madrid, you look at some of the cities that existed before elevators were invented, that's what you had before elevators. Now you have what you can see in every city around, Seattle in particular. Bellevue, has been transformed in 30 years to a high-rise place. So this is just an extension of what we've had, but it's an extension that can move us around a lot better, not just vertically, but horizontally. So what are we doing to make this happen? Well, even before I started in Bellevue, we were taking a look at what's called the Grand Connection, which is a roadway, a pedestrian bike path way between Lake Washington, Mayflower Bay, up past the downtown park, up past the Center for Transit, across the freeway. And this was a drawing that was done. This is actually an easy mile vertically, or a horizontal elevator type thing, going down a path. If there's separation, pedestrians walk on the other side, bikes, and these vehicles operate in that. And they had a route that they thought, and this is just a concept route in Bellevue, where would this go? And again, you can see Mayflower Bay, you can see the freeway. So this was basically some conceptual thinking about where could you test these things out? Where could you get people more comfortable with the idea of doing this? And of course, the whole idea is, how do you get people around in everyday things? You know, how do you get them from park and ride lots into where they work, or just around in a town like Mercer Island? So we've been working on a commute trip reduction plan, trying to figure out, well, how do we get this up and running? How do we put some of these things into practice? And part of what we've been thinking is, how do you develop not only these horizontal elevators, but how do you develop a fleet of flexible electric hand pools, like the Chrysler Pacifica that we saw, for commuters that can also be used during the day for a daytime transportation? How do we develop an easy-to-use app? You know, how do you make it as easy to use as ordering something on Amazon? You know, how can you even use an Alexa app to say, Alexa, reserve a place on a seat on an autonomous van pool for us? How do you use the origin and destination data that we all have now? And a lot of the devices, they know where people in general are coming from, they know where they're going, they know at what times. NREX has a lot of this data. Verizon, which is part of the ACES group, T-Mobile, there's a lot of data out there now, so that we can actually plan a lot better than we've ever been able to plan before, to make sure that we match the capabilities of getting people around to where people actually really want to go. How do we transform and expand selected existing park and ride lots into mobility hubs? And then how do we get some federal funding or private sector funding to make it happen? Then we're going to try to figure out, how do you do the testing of autonomous vehicles on designated routes, like the one that we saw here, like the ones that we've talked about here on Mercer Island. So that we want to go kind of phase by phase, trying to make people assured that this will be safe, it will be convenient, it will be affordable, and it's all designed to take advantage of these new technologies that are coming. So there's a picture of the bus, the Portero electric bus. There were 3 of them that were tested out in Bellevue after a conference, frankly, that we had here in this room about 4 years ago. And as a result of that test, King County Metro has ordered about 130 of them. They're being delivered. They're going to be, as they say, there's 3 of them that operate in Bellevue right now. They also have the capability with what's called Mobileye technology to avoid crashes. In other words, they can be made safe. So if you ride a bike, if you're a walker, if you drive a small car, a scooter, or whatever it might be, these buses won't hit you. because they have anti-collision software in them. So the biggest thing that's happened recently is most of the major automakers have now figured out that this is the future too. ACEs, Automated Connected Electric and Share. Mary Barra, last month, just almost exactly a month ago, the CEO of General Motors, said the General Motors new vision is 0 crashes, 0 emissions, 0 congestion. They can't get there unless they use these technologies, and they're moving fast. But so is BMW and Ford, and of course Tesla and the rest. This is going to happen much, much faster than people thought. In large part because the technology is going to be so much less expensive. It's gotten much cheaper. The battery costs have gone in 5 years from $1,000 a kilowatt hour to about $200 a kilowatt hour. Now that may not mean much, but if you bought a Tesla that's a 60 kilowatt hour battery, that's a $60,000 amount 5 years ago. And you brought that way down. That's why the Model 3 is now affordable. And they're thinking that this will go down to $100 a kilowatt hour in another year or two. When it goes to that, there are groups like the Boston Consulting Group, ING, and others that say by the year 2025, and maybe much sooner, it'll be cheaper to buy one of these on the showroom floor than it is to buy a gas car. Because the fuel costs are 80% cheaper, because the maintenance costs are almost non-existent. I've had an electric car for 4 years, no maintenance on it except tires and a windshield when it got hit by a rock. That's it. I mean, it's nothing compared to what you get. I have 64,000 miles on my car too. It's not that I keep it in the garage. So when you finally get things that are much cheaper, can do more things, that are safer, that are cleaner, guess what happens? The old version goes away. Just like film cameras and digital cameras. Once it hit a certain point, there was a complete changeover. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what do you do to accelerate that day and how do you integrate it into our current transportation system in the smartest ways we can. So that's it in a nutshell. I know that the technology behind a lot of this, things like the NVIDIA chip that Scott was talking about, some of the cloud computing, what they call the deep machine learning, it's beyond me too. But what's happened is that all this is rushing together very quickly to make these things work so much safer and so much better that in just a few years, maybe in a couple of years if you believe Tesla, maybe in 5 years if you believe General Motors, but it will be here. And if we're not at the forefront of this, we're going to miss out on becoming a lot safer, a lot less congested, and with a lot fewer emissions. So Scott, that's it.
What a great presentation to know that it's happening right next door in Bellevue. And I'd like to point out that many of our presenters here today are Mercer Islanders. And it's frankly humbling to think of just how much talent and drive and energy there is right here on Mercer Island. Then we can tap into our neighbors in Bellevue and our neighbors in Seattle, because we are the bridge, literally and figuratively, between those two cities, and develop just that much more energy. We have so much talent in this region, and I want to thank Steve for all of his hard work at the City of Bellevue to put these technology partnerships together, because I think it's going to lead to a lot of great things. So what's the next great thing? What's the next big thing? Well, I'd like to submit to you that it is going to be autonomous shuttles for local mobility. That's the title of our very first seminar series event here today. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to Mercer Island and to our event, Lauren Isaac. Please join me in welcoming Lauren. Lauren is the Director of Business Initiatives at Denver-based Easy Mile. She has roughly 20 years of experience in mobility and transportation, including transit, last mile solutions. And she and I both are veterans of the Parsons Drinker Hop, which doesn't even exist anymore. But it's great to have connections, and it's great to be able to call somebody on the phone and say, hey, can you come tell us about your new technology? And they say, yes, we'd love to. So welcome, Lauren. Thanks for being here. I'll put your presentation up, and there's a clicker on the table for you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. All All right, so thank you for having me. I'm sorry I'm not from Mercer Island, but I'm very happy to be here. This is my first time here. Just to give a little background, like Scott said, I used to work for Parsons Brinkerhoff, but my whole career has pretty much been in transportation. I worked in transit, ride sharing, bike sharing, and most recently in the last few years I got into the driverless space. And what hit me, and the reason why I got so excited about it, is that driverless vehicles are going to be transformative for our entire society. They're going to have a bigger impact than any of those other modes, and frankly, most other changes that are happening in our history right now. So it's really, really exciting to be in this space. And hopefully, through this presentation, you'll see that what EasyMile is doing is actually the beginning of this transformation. So let's dive in now. I'll start with my favorite slide. This is an article so this is a cover of a magazine that says driverless cars are closer than they appear. I can tell you this is actually from October 2015. This is old news. And I hope by the end of this you'll be convinced that driverless vehicles actually are here today. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of quickly walk through what can our future look like, what do we expect to see in 30, 40, 50 years. I'll talk about my company, EasyMile, and the EZ10, and this is actually a picture of the EZ10. How many of you have actually been in the EZ10? All right, that's impressive. There are about 5 or 6 of you. So I'll tell you more about it, but this is our driverless electric shuttle. And then talk about what can be done today. So let's think about the future. So if you can all kind of get your imagination hats on, think about the Jetsons or that kind of thing. Fast forward about 50 years, and I'm going to play out 2 scenarios of what the world could look like with all driverless vehicles. So I will start with scenario 1. So imagine it's a Monday morning. I wake up, I get my kids ready for school, and I summon our private driverless vehicle to come from its parking lot about 15 miles away and pick up my kids. And it picks them up, it brings them to school, and then it comes back to get me. So by the time it gets back to me, I'm ready to go to work. So I get in and I start my commute. And during this commute, first I get on the elliptical trainer and I get my workout in. Then after I do that, I turn on the TV and I watch some TV. And then I realize I've been sitting in traffic for a while. This is taking me a while to get to work, so I'm going to start working. And I sit back, have my coffee, and I start my work day. So that was my commute. I eventually get to the office, I go in, start my work day, and realize that I forgot to get groceries for dinner that night. So I pull up my smartphone, and I tell my car to go out and get groceries. But I tell it to go first to one grocery store where I can get the cheapest produce, and then go to another grocery store to get the cheapest meat, and then the third grocery store to get the cheapest toilet paper. And then the car knows, once it's done running all those errands for me, to go back to that remote parking lot and wait for its next assignment. So that is scenario number 1. And I have relayed that scenario to many people, and most people actually hear that and say, that sounds amazing. This is my dream come true. I've been waiting for this personal chauffeur to basically do everything for me. But if you're coming from the transportation world, you hear that and think that is our worst nightmare. Imagine if every single person used their vehicle, their personal vehicle, in that exact way. So there's no mention of public transit. You're not only introducing a lot of single occupancy vehicle trips, you're actually introducing the brand new zero occupancy vehicle trips. So you actually have the potential to add 5 or 10 times more vehicle miles traveled to our roadways, which is frightening considering the congestion that's already out there today. So now I'm going to walk you through the second scenario. So imagine, I'm going to do the same thing. It's Monday morning. I wake up, I get my kids ready for school, and I get them onto their driverless school bus, and they go off to school. And then, when I'm about ready to go to work, I use my smartphone and I summon one of these driverless shuttles to come and pick me up. So it comes, it picks me up, it picks up a couple of my neighbors, and it brings us to the local train station. And then it's perfectly timed, so I get there, I hop onto the train. The whole thing is paid for seamlessly, I never pull out my wallet, and I take the train downtown to get to work. And then when I get to the downtown, I still have about a mile to go. If it's a nice day, I might get on a bike share bike. If it's a rainy day, I might get on another one of these EZ10s, and it takes me that last mile to get to my office. And then once I'm in the office, again, I realize I don't have any groceries for dinner that night. So I use my smartphone and I schedule a food delivery for that evening. So that's scenario number 2. I call that the utopian scenario. The big difference between the first one, the nightmare scenario, and the utopian scenario is really the level of ride sharing that's happening. That's really the one big distinction. So I want to really quickly walk through the difference between these two scenarios. So from a safety perspective, because these are all driverless vehicles, we're actually going to see massive improvements in safety. It doesn't matter how much ride sharing happens. From a vehicle miles traveled perspective, you can imagine that the nightmare scenario is going to have huge significant increases in vehicle miles traveled. Whereas the utopian scenario, we still potentially might see some increases, but not nearly as many as that nightmare scenario. Greenhouse gas emissions. I think it's really important to point out that driverless vehicles do not necessarily mean electric vehicles. One does not equate with the other. So we cannot assume that in either of these scenarios that greenhouse gas emissions will go up or down because we don't know. From an urban sprawl perspective, there is the risk that people are going to be willing to live much farther from where they work just because their value of time has now changed when they're in their vehicle. From a parking requirements perspective, this one is interesting. So in the nightmare scenario, people in theory would continue to own vehicles the way that they do today. So in theory, you would see no change in parking requirements. However, it is possible that parking will be relocated. So we might see our downtowns reduce the amount of parking, and parking is moved outside of downtown, but then you can see how the vehicle miles traveled would increase because those vehicles still need to get to the people. In the utopian scenario, on the other hand, people would own a lot less vehicles, so the parking requirements would go down. And finally, low-income mobility. So Scott very optimistically said, well, we won't see public transit go away, but there are a lot of people that are skeptical about that. As the driverless vehicles increase, that public transit will go down significantly, and that will ultimately impact the low-income mobility community. Whereas in the utopian scenario, the idea is that the cities and our communities still have very rich, reliable transit and mobility options, including first and last mobility options, so that low-income mobility is actually improved. So this brings me to why I joined Easy Mile. Easy Mile embodies all of these things. It's bringing together the shared, the automated, and the electric vehicles to be able to, as this graphic shows, and this is a quote from our CEO, he says, to reclaim our cities. And the idea is that we take our cities that are very, very congested today and actually reclaim that space. You have more green area, less vehicles traveling, and more people taking advantage of the seats in the vehicles. So let me tell you a little bit about Easy Mile. So to begin with, Easy Mile, first of all, it's a driverless technology company. We are not a manufacturer. We actually partner with a third party, a different company for manufacturing the vehicles. Our company has, I think we're actually up to 120 employees. I literally can't keep up because our company's growing so fast. It's just over 3 years old, but in the company, most of the people in it are people like software engineers, artificial intelligence specialists, people that focus on robotics, and we are developing the technology. We actually put our technology into a lot of different types of vehicles. So for example, we just announced a partnership with TLD, which is the largest supplier of airport ground support equipment, and we're putting the driverless technology into those tow trailers that carry the luggage around the airports. So I wanted to mention that. The company is headquartered in France. You heard that our North America headquarters are in Denver. But we also have offices in Singapore, USA, Singapore and Australia, and then we just opened an office in Berlin. And we are a privately funded company. So here is the Easy 10. It actually fits perfectly with the ACES acronym. So it's an automated vehicle. It is connected. It can communicate with traffic signals or any other roadside units. It is all electric, so no greenhouse gas emissions. And it is shared, obviously. It can fit 12 people, 6 people seated, 6 people standing. This little bar right here, that's actually a wheelchair ramp. It's an automatically deploying ramp. And the vehicle does not require any additional infrastructure, so it can literally be deployed on our roadways today. The vehicle follows a predetermined map of a route, and it stays on that route. And the vehicle can go up to 25 miles an hour. On average, they're going about 12 to 15 miles an hour, which may sound slow, but you'd be amazed how many great applications there are today for this. So I'll talk about that more in a second. In terms of safety, this vehicle could not be any safer. So the vehicle, just to give you an idea, it has this range of technologies that it uses. So lasers, odometry, cameras, GPS. It combines all of these things so that it basically can do three things. So it knows exactly where it is at all times to an accuracy of 5 centimeters. It knows exactly where it's going, and then it knows everything around it so that it knows if there are any obstacles. So the vehicle knows, by reading the world around it, if it needs to either stay its course, slow down, or make an emergency stop, depending on any kind of movement around the vehicle. So these vehicles, like I said, are super safe. We've operated them over 100,000 miles around the world, and we've not had a single accident. And this is similar to some of the technology that Steve was describing with Proterra. I mean, it's constantly reading the world around it so that you don't have a driver in there that could get distracted with a cell phone or anything like that. This is technology with significant redundancies. It's actually constantly evaluating its surroundings. So, and then in terms of applications, so like I said, these are relatively slow-moving vehicles, but I think what's exciting about it is that there are so many great use cases in our communities today. So we are operating in all of these different types of areas. So enclosed areas, examples include college campuses, business parks, airports. Urban areas, we can be a first and last mile solution from transit hubs, from park and ride lots. The list goes on. Suburban areas, rural areas, so these vehicles can really help to fill that first and last mile gap. And I'm going to give you some examples of where we're doing that. So this is just a smattering of some of our projects around the world. We've operated over 100 different projects in 19 countries. You can see we brand them differently depending on what our clients want to see, but these pictures, so on the top left, this is in Singapore. Gardens by the Bay, which is a huge horticultural tourist destination. We've been operating there over a year. This is in Lausanne, Switzerland. Down here is in Dubai. Next one is Darwin, Paris, and then Tampa, Florida. So we have quite the wide range of both the looks of the vehicles, just based on the wrapping, and also the location, and very much in the different situations that the vehicle is operating in. And I wanted to mention, we do everything from 1 or 2 day demos, just for places that want to see what does this technology look like and introduce it to our stakeholders, all the way to, like I mentioned, over year-long operations. So I want to highlight a few projects that we have going on in North America right now. This is our very first project that we started in North America, and I know a couple people in the room have actually been on site and visited this. So this is our Easy 10 at an employment center in San Ramon, California. So this is in the Bay Area. There's this huge business park. We're talking, I think it has something like 10 parking lots surrounding it, to give you an idea of the magnitude. These vehicles are intended to circulate and bring the employees around as needed while they're there. So the operation started in March of 2017. It does operate in mixed traffic, so there are bicyclists, pedestrians, and other vehicles that are going around where the vehicles are operating. And what's super exciting is literally just last week we just got the federal approval to be able to cross the public roadways. So we're going to be doing a lot more on this site. So the next one is in Arlington, Texas, and I'm going to show you a video of our vehicle in action here at the end of this. But in Arlington, this is a city that's known as the largest city in the United States that does not have public transit. So I guess you could say this was their rebellious move, but it really shows that they are very much an early adopter. We just launched 2 months ago, and the vehicles, we have 2 vehicles that are bringing people from their sports stadium to a parking lot. So it is a first and last mile solution. There are a few things I think that are really notable about what they have going on here. One thing is that the vehicles are not intended to bring every single person from the parking lot to the stadium. It's a massive, massive sports stadium that would never happen with 2 12-person vehicles. But what's great is that it's a mobility option for people that really can't do that walk as well, and for people that don't want to. And I can tell you, as someone who was there for the grand opening, when it's 120-degree heat, there are probably a lot of people that don't want to do that walk. So it's just a great alternate to walking or biking or what other people are doing. The other thing that's cool about this project, and this is true for the majority of our projects, is that this is a stepping stone for this client. This is just the beginning of what they want to do. They actually have plans to operate it on public roadways, bringing students from the university to a parking lot, and ultimately throughout the city. So they have bigger plans, and that's what's exciting, is they're kind of tracking with the technology to introduce what we have today, and then keep on enhancing what they're going to do over the next few years. And then finally, this is our most recent contract. We just won a contract with the Minnesota Department of Transportation to do winter testing. And that's going to be starting next month. This is really exciting for us because we've spent a lot of time in either neutral climates or hot and humid climates, but obviously the winter is really important, especially in a place like this. So we'll be learning a lot about how our vehicles do and what we need to adapt to get the vehicle set for winter operations. And then the other highlight is, when you watch the Super Bowl this year, look out for the EZ10 because we'll be doing a week-long demo leading up to the Super Bowl. So we're excited about that. So what now? So you're seeing this theme of shared, electric, autonomous. This is really what's the most exciting thing about this technology is that it's here today and it's not doing what the automakers are doing. So let me just specify. The automakers, they are all adding all kinds of partially automated features. Like Scott mentioned, you're seeing things like the adaptive cruise control and self-parking and that kind of thing. And that's really great for safety. It's the beginnings of it. But they are not going to be at full autonomy for many years to come. And what is exciting is that by introducing this today, you're introducing the driverless technology in a very safe way, but also in a shared way. So you're doing it where it's all electric and it's shared so that our society sees it with this concept, with this context. So I also wanted to mention, and this is wearing more of like a public agency hat, when introducing the driverless technology to our society, we want to think about how can we get more towards that utopian society and less towards the nightmare one. So this is just a list of policies that a city or a public agency might think about to actually influence how the technology is introduced. So things like charging for vehicle miles traveled. These are great ways, this is a great way to kind of help people think through the implications of having their zero occupancy vehicle running around the city. Another example is adjusting land use policies to reduce urban sprawl. Really penalizing people for purchasing cars. You know, if there are good enough options without having a vehicle, you want to have people maybe pay extra in sales tax or pay more for parking. That might sound terrible to you right now, but if there are good alternatives out there, it's a great way to make sure human behavior recognizes the impacts to society. Incentivize electric vehicle usage and ownership. Like I said, these are very distinct technologies. So government is in a position to make sure that we introduce this technology as electric. And then finally, think through transit pricing. So I used to live in San Francisco, and you all might have seen this in Seattle too, but Uber, and this was probably 5 years ago, did a campaign where they did a Match Muni campaign, and they charged $2.25 for every trip. And you can imagine for that, whatever, 2-week period, people were not using transit, they were using Uber. And so imagine, as all these different mobility options get cheaper and cheaper, especially as we reduce the need for the driver, we need to make sure that the different modes are competitive. So transit needs to stay competitive so that it becomes a viable option. And then I think one of the most important takeaways is that any agencies, organizations, companies can start a pilot today. And that's what's so exciting about the driverless shuttles is that they are here today. And there's a lot of good reason to do it. So build awareness, help stakeholders and help the society understand how safe the technology is and how